Welcome, everyone, to the ENHANCE Lunchinar. So today, on the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, we continue our webinar series on diversity-related pressing issues in academia. Today's topic is IT accessibility. So welcome again. The topic is a topic that sits at the intersection of technology, inclusion, and equal rights for everyone. So whether it is accessing public services online or using learning platforms or interacting with emotionally accessible robots, accessibility is central to building truly inclusive technological environments and also experiences. So today we are joined by three very interesting and fantastic speakers or experts from different corners of the ENHANCE Alliance with connection to our alliance. And so we will explore together what accessibility means or can mean or should mean and why it matters. And of course, how we can actually get something out of it and then profit from this conversation, this discussion today for everyone. And enhanced Lunchinars are bite-sized, so small-scale learning sessions, which are designed to foster critical thinking and engage our community and stimulate public debate. So I will just go back to my PowerPoint presentation and change also the slide just in a while. But so bite-sized learning sessions, so that are really designed for critical thinking and for engagement and stimulating public debate. So our aim is to create a space where we can all learn and reflect on pressing issues in academia and also beyond in the society. In today's session, we will be exploring why IT accessibility matters and how it impacts us, possibly, and what practical steps we could take to build a more inclusive, accessible technological environments or experiences. Accessibility is not just a technical add-on, it is a matter of equity, dignity, and universal participation in the society, in a society that becomes more and more technological around us every day. So this is like the starter introduction, let's say. But before we really come to the discussion with our speakers, I will just change the slide and tell you first things first, because we also want to create a safe space and safe and respectful space for having a conversation and discussion with everyone in our community, in our society. And so please consider the following points. Diversity itself is not always visible. A diverse society requires that its members are visible to others. So also please don't make any assumptions during the event when someone says something or writes something or you just see the picture or the video on the screen. So meet everyone as their own self, please. And encourage everyone's right to participate. That I will try that, of course, and hopefully you will also share your questions or comments with the speakers during the discussion with each other. So feel encouraged. And my favorite one is the last one. Listen to understand, not just to respond. And I think that is also very important to have a very interesting and insightful discussion and in a safe space. After saying that, I will just, I have already mentioned the goals of the Enhanced Lunchinars, focusing on promotion of dialogue and critical discussions, providing engagement possibilities and some learning, but also we want to expand our accessibility and reach by offering such, short, but hopefully meaningful and relevant online offers that are open to all people, students, staff, lifelong learners. We have also today people not only from ENHANCE, and we have also registrations outside of other, from other alliances even, or from the society, but mainly also the majority is ENHANCE community members. Okay, so the agenda today, I will change the slide again. So we are just finishing welcoming and introduction part, and we are about to come to the panel discussion about IT accessibility with three speakers that I will briefly introduce. To you. So let me first start with Dr. Micol Spitale. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Electronics, Information and Bioengineering at Politecnico di Milano. Her work focuses on AI and social robotics with a strong emphasis on creating technologies that support well-being and adapt to users, especially children and people with cognitive disabilities. She brings both a technical and human-centered perspective to accessibility in this kind of future tech. So I'm very happy to welcome you, Micol.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. And as next, we have David Sichau. He is the ENHANCE Alliance IT officer based at ETH Zurich, who is leading the work package dedicated to IT in ENHANCE Alliance and co-lead of the Alliance's work package on IT infrastructure and services. He plays basically an important role, key role in shaping the digital environment of ENHANCE Alliance and brings deep insight, of course, into the challenges, but also opportunities of creating inclusive systems. Welcome also, David. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for the introduction.
And last but not least, we have our speaker, third speaker, Nima Hakimi. He is a front-end developer currently working at NAUF IT in Norway. And he is an ENHANCE alumni, having studied at NTNU in Trondheim. And he also spent a semester at RWTH Aachen, by the way, also. So he also joined at our international programs when he was still studying. Nima recently completed a master thesis focused on web accessibility in agile development, offering a developer's perspective today's discussion on how accessibility is approached and also overlooked and integrated in real-world workflows. Also, welcome, Nima.
Thank you. Looking forward to great discussions.
Me too. Yeah, exactly. And the discussion is, of course, about a technical topic. I am not a technical person, maybe just to do some spoiling. So I will be not the person who is using technical terms here. And I also ask our speakers not to be too technical, even though we have some possibly visitors or audience with technical background on IT. So this is for everyone, basically. So we will try, if something is not clear, any abbreviation you hear, let me know in the chat, or just we are happy also to explain this to you if still some technical terminologies from IT universe are mentioned. After the discussion, we will have a moderated Q&A, basically, so you can, as audience, ask questions and hopefully get some answers. So you are encouraged to participate and ask questions. Of course, there are different ways to do it. You can just put your question in the chat. I will read it out for the speakers. Whoever feels address, he or she can just answer. You can just raise your hand, a digital hand in Zoom, and then speak. That's also totally fine. But for those of you also who are already having some comments or questions during the discussion with the three speakers, you can also add them in the Slido. I will also put the link of Slido in the chat for those of you who maybe don't want to forget the question or the comment. So feel free to add your comment anytime during the discussion already. So we will go into your questions or comments, of course, after the discussion. Let me just put first this, what I have just promised to you in the chat. So if you just click on this, this is just for the audience. So this is just an extra opportunity to add any questions basically already now. But it is not, of course, expected fully. Okay, let me just go back to the presentation. And at the end of the session, we will offer you or give you a practical tool and ask you to test that about today's topic. Okay, I will just stop screen sharing. So then all the speakers and myself are, let's say, in the spotlight function of Zoom, and you can see us hopefully big enough and focus on the discussion and join whenever you feel like. Let me just start actually with something that I asked to the speakers, and not to the speakers, sorry, for the public, because I ask you what does come to your mind when you hear IT accessibility, and then some of you answered that. Let's look at the results, and I will just read them out. So then it is maybe starters of the discussion, and then let's see what our speakers think of it, because it's also the first time that you will hear or see it. So the question was to the audience, and some people did it, even though I see lots of answers here from some people. What comes to your mind when you hear IT accessibility? Just answer without overthinking. So some people said, for example, disabilities, awareness, everyone, awareness by meeting persons with disabilities, again, so language, saving of time, but also we have costs on that. I'm curious, after hearing this or seeing this, what comes to your mind? Maybe, David, let me start with you and then look at our other speakers' perspectives also. What comes to your mind when you hear IT accessibility in your environment?
So from my perspective, during software development, in my mind came a lot of discussion with others, how to actually do it, because I think it's always, accessibility is always a way of compromising things, because if you focus solely on one group, you might neglect needs of other groups. And so it's always a compromise, and you always have to really take care that you're not optimizing it too much for one group and forget the needs of other groups. And I think that's one of the challenges I have experienced, and I spent a lot of time discussing it. With
this
team.
Compromising effect. Thank you. It's interesting. I was not also aware of this kind of compromising perspective. How does this sound to you, Nima, when you hear this compromising perspective from what just David said? Does it also match to your experience or observations in IT?
Yeah, I mean, what David said is really true, because when developing software, of course, we have like WCAG as a standard, but for me, that's just the starting point to accessibility. The accessibility is about providing access to all people. So it is nice to be aware that WCAG doesn't mean the finish line, but just the beginning. So that's how I look at it. The term accessibility.
It's good to start with it. And for you, Micol, because from what I understood, you are in, let's say, in slightly different environment, active robotics. I read about it, disabilities, and also kind of, which I very like, this emotional accessibility and so on. So it is kind of next step, maybe even just looking at the starting point, what Nima said.
Yeah,
and,
so
how does it sound to you?
Maybe my perspective is a little bit more research oriented. So what I'm trying to understand first is what actually the user needs, and what are all the barriers they encounter whenever interacting with some technologies. I can share a little example that resonates in my mind. Once we did a study in a therapeutic center with children with cognitive disabilities with a Google Home. So what we did was to ask the therapist just to interact with the Google Home and with the children. And one of the main results of this study was that children were not able to make a full request to the Google Home with the trigger word plus the request, because cognitively there was like a difference. And so they either say, okay, Google, so to trigger the device, or they make the request. So I think this is a perfect example on how these devices are often not designed with special user needs in mind. And so what I'm doing is studying how can we improve these technologies to make them more accessible to everyone. But I also agree with David that there is a conflict also, because it's very difficult to just meet everyone's needs. So yeah.
Thank you for that. It's also good to look and keep this kind of accessibility topic that is not only screen or screen oriented, right? And then also to look at other digital or technological developments around us, how this should become or must become accessible for the users, for those who are targeted at. But David, just looking at what you do, of course, in ENHANCE, you are fully involved, and accessibility challenge at much a larger scale in ENHANCE. So what would you say? What are currently the biggest obstacles to implementing this in reality, accessible digital system, accessible technological environments across academic institutions? And you are working with 10 of them. So, and what comes to your mind when it comes to biggest obstacles that you are facing or observing in the implementation of that?
Yeah, so my point is often it's not like the technical things where you have WCAG, which is a good guideline to guide you through the technical obstacles. I think often what's neglected are like you have processes where you lose people, and you can do it as you lose people during a very complicated process, even normal people without any disabilities or needs or special needs. And I think that's also one of the challenges. We need to think when we design processes, how we can get most of the people through the processes. And if we have complex processes, even with technical guidance, we might improve a little bit the accessibility to the tools. But in the end, if it's too complex for people with needs, it's much harder to actually access the things than we do without needs. And if you have complex things which need certain needs, you struggle with it, I think.
Do you have an example of that when you just think of needs of different users? What is something that you have to compromise with?
If you think about, for example, some registration forms where you have 3 steps, for example, you have first add your personal data, then you have the next step where you add, for example, data about your courses you have already, and then the third page about some additional information. And this looks very easy. You can click, I type it, you click next, type it, click next, type it. But from the perspective from people with, for example, which has limited eyesight, the process is just slower. And this is something often neglected. Even with technical tools, they have not, for example, the same speed to fill out the forms like people without any needs. And I think we know that each delay in using these tools, actually, people just say, it's too complicated, I stop doing it. And if you have, even with technical needs, we will not often be not able to bring the needs for people, for example, with color blindness or with total blindness to the same speed like people with normal eyesight. And I think that's one of the challenges that it's often neglected. We just do the technical things, then everybody is able to access it, but it's still hard to access it. And I think that's something to keep in mind when designing processes.
Nima, I'm curious how this sounds to you. What do you think about this? Also, in your master thesis, you worked on that topic and your experiences. So please let us know how this sounds to you and your perspective.
So my master thesis was about it was an investigation of how agile teams address accessibility when it's a large scale agile organization. And the findings indicated that a low level of accessibility knowledge combined with a broad accessibility standards, because if we look at it, WCAG or WCAG, it's a guide designed for the whole web, and we have we have games in the web, we have shopping web pages, education, so many different, and it should be like applicable to all of that. So it's quite broad and tries to not be so specific while sort of being specific there where it's very possible. So it's hard to kind of translate them and see what they actually mean. And they also really heavily relied on accessibility testing tools, the automated ones. And we know that those just cover like 40 to 50% of WCAG criteria. So manual evaluations where a human go through and actually evaluates was like done on a yearly basis, and that was due to a mandated accessibility statement update. So it's getting down prioritized. Although I'm working in a Norwegian Labor and Welfare Administration, so it's like one of the how do you say, there is like 3-4 blind employees here who is also accessibility experts. So it's like, I would say maybe more equipped to deal with accessibility challenges than other organizations. So yes.
Yes, just a question or comment to you,
Yes.
Nima. In the preparation when we had our first meeting about this topic, you have also raised the point that these guidelines, compliance doesn't necessarily it does not fit to the real world accessibility. So it was the difference between like ticking the box, like okay, I serve that in these protocols and it looks good on paper, but actually the truly inclusive design looks different. So how do you look at that?
Yeah, just to context to the viewers and listeners, I am legally blind myself. I have a vision of 4 to 5% left. So I can talk from my own view, because everyone, it's not like you can be visually impaired and that's it. There is so many different ways to be visually impaired, and with that there is so many needs, different needs that comes up. So what I meant by that was that WCAG doesn't really focus on my needs. It usually like the main focus of WCAG is to make things accessible for those that are fully blind.
Fully blind, not like partly.
Yeah, exactly. And it sort of makes sense, because if you are fully blind and a website is not accessible or doesn't apply to WCAG standards, the website could be unusable. But if you are visually impaired and you use magnifier, as I do, then my needs are not like covered by WCAG. But it's not like I won't be able to use a bad designed web page, or but it's like it takes so much more cognitive load and energy to be able to do the same, or to be able to complete the task I mean for to do. So that was what I meant. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for. Thank you, Nima. To you, Micol, over to you. How does this sound to you? Is it also somehow relevant in the way how we are dealing with new technologies of robots off the screen? So how do they deal with people with seeing disabilities or limitations, any kind of?
Yeah, I think this is a great point also in terms of like more interactive technology. So of course, there are not yet some regulation for this kind of new advanced technologies, but I resonate and I echo what has been said so far, that sometimes there is a tension between like whatever is policy, guidelines, regulations, and actually what is useful for the user and how to make it inclusive in terms of design. So sometimes it feels that these kind of guidelines are just to make some checks, to say, oh, we are compliant with this or that, but then eventually they are not really meeting the needs of people. So in my experience, what I'm researching is how to actually get these needs from the user themselves, and then build some systems, some models that are able to adapt to these people. And there is all another, I think, argument about the adaptation, and so how these models that can adapt to the behavior of people are also actually biased towards, for example, neurotypical people, because of course all these AI models are trained with data set of people, of neurotypical people. And so there is another barriers, because there is not like a representative AI model for people, for example, with cognitive disabilities. So I think as we get also with more advanced technology, as the problems become, just augmented, because there are multiple parts of the technology that could create some barriers for people, and so not being accessible for them.
Yeah, interesting also to look at this kind of the snapshots of advanced technologies. I'm not sure, of course, how this already plays a role today in the classical screen-oriented accessibility issues like web pages, but or softwares and so on. But I see kind of we are developing also that way, probably. That will be more relevant, possibly. David, when we were preparing this session today also, there are lots of topics we could come into, but I think something stayed in my mind once you said accessibility often comes too late. Yeah, whatever technology is being developed doesn't matter, I think. So you said that it's coming too late. And why does that happen? Where and when maybe should be accessibility issues considered? How do you see that?
I mean, I think during the development process of a software, often in the beginning, the focus is on the best features, focusing, and then you're nearly done. And then, oh, we should think about accessibility. And then you start, what's needed. And I think often then much more work needed to actually even target very small needs compared to when you start from the beginning and say, what framework do I use? Do I use a framework which has support for it? And I think nowadays there are very good web frameworks actually available, which provides good coverage of WCAG. And if you make the right decisions in the beginning, it's much easier than if you start, don't think about it, just put out features, and in the end think, oh shit, we should take care about contrast ratios, for example. And then you start dealing with contrast ratios instead of thinking in the beginning, what are the color schemes we are using in our software, like these simple things. And if you take them care from the beginning, you don't have such a workload in the end, and it comes naturally.
Yeah. Okay. You also mentioned in this explanation about decisions. Someone takes decisions when things happen in the development of any technology, basically. And what do you say, David? Maybe also continue with you, and then here also if others want to add something. What do you say to people who think IT accessibility doesn't affect me, or it is not relevant for this new project, and then it's probably too late when one day they still notice. What is the thing that we must say, or what do you say to people when you see this kind of unacceptance?
There's a good quote. I think we always talk about the needs of people which has, for example, color blindness or which are not able to walk. But I think there are often situational disabilities. For example, I sit in the coffee and I'm not able to understand you because I forgot my headphones, so I need subtitles, or also temporarily. So, for example, I have a broken arm. I can't use my right arm. So how do I actually use my computer? I would have really struggled to actually use my computer. And I think if you look just at the blind people, we have a very small number, or the people with a lost limb. It's a very small percentage. But if you look at the people which has temporarily lost the limb, these numbers are getting much higher. And I think that's also important to consider, that it's not, we target the people with the needs, but we have a much broader audience, like people which are temporarily or situationally disabled. And I think if we neglect them in a business, we lose a lot of possible customers, or we lose a lot of students when you say, you can't access the building if you're, or you can only study if you have two arms, and then you have going for skiing and break your arm and you need to skip the course. So,
yeah. And Nima, how is your experience on that? Do you experience or observe some people also in leadership levels saying, hey, it doesn't affect me, accessibility is maybe just a nice add-on? Cost money also, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it's a big issue, but luckily not here where I work. I mean, I work in a public institution, so so we don't really have that problem, but it's still being sort of damn prioritized because it's just hard to understand. Like we have a design system, so many components of a web page is like pre-tested before we use that. So it's like a really good way to standardize and automate accessibility work, because then you have a group of experts who test for every component, like buttons, tables, and then we just put it in like a puzzle pieces together and form a web page. So that's a way to enhance accessibility, to automate the process, and with a group of people who dedicates their work towards.
Thank you. And Micol, how do you test the technologies you are doing research on, or how do you see that it is tested by those who are making it? How do they do it?
So, I mean, in a research environment, usually you, as always, include the user from the beginning step of the design process. So you actually involve them in trying to understand and identify which could be the system requirements that might meet with their needs. And then usually you prototype whatever came from this maybe co-design session. We use this technique that is called the participatory design. That means that we are actually actively involving the end user into the design process in order to build and develop these technologies that are more inclusive. And we prototype whatever came from this participatory design session, and we then make them use it. And again, we make them evaluate with some, methodology present in the research literature, and we kind of validate whether the prototype was actually meeting with their expectation or not, and we can reiterate again. So it's like a usual design process, iterative 3-step design process. So like co-designing, prototyping, and testing, and then repeat it again and again until you get something that you are satisfied with and meet with the users.
So there is a clear defined process how to let it co-design or get feedback from users. Okay, sounds logical to me in a way, of course, and even though in practice, I can imagine some obstacles are being experienced by all of you speakers, but also listeners, for those of you involved in IT possibly. And obstacles, there was one aspect, David, that you also had in mind, focusing on regulatory aspects, like all these regulations. I mean, there is probably, of course, this general human right-oriented interest to include everyone. That is one thing. But on the other side, we all have our rules and laws around us, not only the protocols that was mentioned a couple of times, but also in different countries, different rules. Also looking at what Nima said, of course, public institutions are, I think, in that way, quite a good role model, being inclusive and accessible, because they are forced to also to that. And I think this is also some kind of consequence of these regulatory aspects. But how is it for you to deal with 10 different universities, 8 countries, different rules and laws and regulatory aspects? How can one manage that or address that? What role does it play, regulatory parts?
I think we're very fortunate to be in Europe, because I think the Swiss and the European standards are more or less compatible. I think they're both based on WCAG 2.1. But I see the laws more as an enabler. So that it enables teams to focus on accessibility. I think without laws, often it's just additional money. So let's skip this part. And I think with laws, you really have some leverage against decision makers to say, but we have to. You can't just ignore it. And I think that's a really important aspect. And you can pinpoint people down and say, hey, but you should make it accessible. And I think it starts even with simple things like in the village where I live, I'm in the legislative, and there we have laws. And the laws are just JPEG scans of Word documents. So it's a bad quality. You can't search the text. And I think if you can't access it with any tools to actually extract the content of a important law. And I think that's really a problem. And then you say, but we have a law that this should be accessible and you should do this. And then, but it's so much work. And I say, we don't care. There's a law. You have to. And I think that's what I see the law. It's an enabler to focus on the big problems.
Yeah.
Not to make it
Thank
perfect.
You. Yeah. Nima, you studied in 2 enhanced universities, mainly in NTNU, and then you even visited RWTH. How was your experience, just thinking back on, of course, in this case, in terms of accessibility issues? Where did you have like good practices or worst practices in a way that that helped you or supported you, or it was an obstacle? So how did you see it?
I had like in general, I had really good. I'm like really glad that I went to those universities. I mean, there was always the good aspect is the staff, like very helpful. As long as I told them what I need and what are my needs, they tried their best, in most cases at least, to accommodate. So it was really good. But when it comes to the digital services in the universities, I actually here I could come with an example that like outside of WCAG's scope, but which mattered a lot to me and made it so hard. So in NTNU we had this learning platform called Blackboard, which is a content management system. So every teacher could build their own sort of course page with their own structure. Some teachers like was really into file structures and directories and made complicated like every file had their own directory and such. But while some other professors was like sort of just putting everything in a table, and some reading materials was outside of Blackboard, and there was like some hidden links to find them. So that was like my struggle, and it's like really the universal design or usability if challenge, if we will, like it's the accessibility. If we like say that is WCAG, then it was accessible because it was like I could find it, but it took me so much time and so much effort to do it. Right?
What could help you? What was the missing part that you said that maybe David can take for the next enhanced developments? You never know. Is there anything? It's a difficult question, I know.
Yeah, I mean, of course. And the main thing I would suggest universities to do is to build a standard. And standards in every way, like in how to manage the course pages, how their pages are structured in the UI elements, like where they are. Because when I'm, for example, using a magnifier, I see just 1/6 of the screen at a time. So then I have to drag the mouse around and like assume where different UI elements are, right? So then it's very challenging for me if they are not where I expect them to be. Then I have to start at one corner, go like one of these search algorithms, go to the side, go a bit down, go back, and then like move back and forth. So it's quite so standardization is maybe the way to go, like at least a way to start. Yes.
A way to start. Yeah, probably the road is not really defined, of course, because it's really so complex. I can just look at the advanced technologies that are now also on your plate, Micol. Probably it is more complex than all these screen-oriented accessibility topics, but also these are already complex enough. Yeah. Does it resonate also, Micol, with your experience, with your observations?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's also, I totally agree with David's point about that the regulation could be enablers. On the other end, I mean, it is well known the fact that US innovates and Europe regulates, you know? So sometimes this kind of like attitude to regulate everything and so on can be a little bit of a barrier for some of the innovation that could start from Europe. But on the other hand, I believe that especially with new advanced technology, policy regulation is so important, especially for ethical aspect, because whenever we are, dealing with the accessibility issue, it could be also impacting some of the ethical concern. So if I make like a very quick example that is actually relevant for my field, for example, whenever we have to make people, user with special need or with specific cognitive disabilities sign an informed consent, of course, there is a tutor or a caregiver that is doing on their behalf, but it's important for transparency that they really understand what they are going to do. So how can you ensure that they really understand it? So this is like, of course, an ethical issue, because on one end you have like, of course, some regulation. On the other end, you have the ethical duty of make them really understand what is going on. So I think in the picture we should include also this constraint, or like this important aspect that should be considered. And we can also think about the cookies on the website. The design of the cookie is so bad because no one will ever read all the cookie stuff and so on. So this is a very manipulative way to fit into some European regulation or whatever. So this is just to say that, maybe some policy regulation could, it's okay that they are there, but then it's important they make sense and they are actually relevant, and people implement them in an ethical way and not trying to take some other shortcut, like to manipulate people to behave in a specific way. And I think the cookies is a perfect example of it. So
especially in the commercial sector, probably. And looking back to our universities again, Micol, I stay with you for a while also with this. You mentioned innovation, and of course accessibility is today's topic. How does this match together? Because there are also like kind of critics that accessibility slows down the innovation process. Of course, it costs money and so on, these kind of things. How do they still match to each other? How do you see it in your area?
Actually, from my point of view, all these advanced technology should be enabler for people who need it the most. So it shouldn't, for example, whenever I'm like, developing such a robot or so on, my goal in mind is to help someone and have a social, a positive impact on their life, not just for the sake of like, fun for people to chat with the robot, but it will be something that is useful for them. So for me, this is actually the ultimate goal. It's not like something that is an obstacle or is a barrier. Actually, I think I can innovate more because I have a huge driver that it's helping someone and having a positive impact in their life. So, yeah.
Thank you. I will just organically go a little bit also extending the discussion. We are touching different aspects, and I just see something triggered, Björn. What you said, Micol, I'm curious, Björn. You have the word. Go ahead. Or maybe another idea you want to share, please, or question, whatever. Can you hear us? So please unmute yourself, Björn, if you are here. At least that was his hand, but now it disappeared to me at least. Okay, I will just keep it in mind. Maybe he appears again. And then, but thanks. So just wrapping up this part that you just added, Micol, about this innovation and accessibility. That, of course, I think a little bit organically also to remember the audience, 21 people are here, also to add any question to Slido. If you have any, just in a couple of minutes, I'm happy to also look at that if there are any questions or comments there. But I have a question. Let's see who will answer that. Let me start maybe with David. If you could change one thing about how IT accessibility is approached today, implemented today, you can think of development phase, design phase, of infrastructure phase, whatever comes to your mind. What would it be? What would you for sure change if you would have, let's say, the power to change it? It's a kind of imaginary question, but feel free. I'm curious.
Look at it earlier.
Look at it earlier. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing, that you actually target accessibility in the start of a project and not wait until the project has continued quite a while, and then added on top. I think often accessibility is like added on the top, which is often not the best thing. And if we can focus on accessibility very early in the design process, it would be make the life of the developers much easier, and in the end, the life of people with needs much easier.
Yeah, but I have a question to that just before I go to the other speakers. The life of developers. Okay, we even have one front-end developer here in the room, Nima, and possibly some in the audience. But how can you make their life really easier in a way? Do they always understand what is really needed on accessibility side, even though you say it maybe very, very beginning?
I think if you take care during the design process that your tools are, that the framework you're using, the tools you're using are accessible, it makes the life much easier. If you develop and then on some stage it was, but we need this, and then you go back and, for example, need to change the framework or need to redo whole designs of pages because it's not possible to make these current designs easy accessible, and then you have always these compromises. And if you look at it from the beginning, I think it's much easier and take the requirements seriously.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Micol, what would be the thing that you would change if you would have the power?
That's a good question.
What really annoys you so far in your experience?
I think, I mean, I would love to have a little bit more flexibility from, I'm in Italy, and so there are a lot of constraints and barriers also in terms of regulation and so on. And
flexibility in regulations, you mean, like that?
Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes even to collaborate, for example, with, I don't know, therapeutic centers or hospitals on so on and so forth, it's very difficult, even if you try to, design, to propose a project for designing for accessibility. And so it will be great, I don't know, to have some agreement put in place from the beginning so that the process might be smoother. So for me, the struggles are more bureaucratic than technical.
Okay, so then it's interesting because especially for me, it was a kind of eye-opening or horizon-opening information when I found out that you are working on accessibility issues, but not for screen products, but it's like robots. It's for me like, okay, it is correct. It is like the new technologies. Maybe in one day we will have enhanced robots supporting us, assisting us in our university journeys and so on. So all these things that we have now in a screen with different platforms will be maybe more emotional or human looking in a way. That's so interesting.
Also for now there are a lot of robotic application in like industrial settings like warehouse and so on. And often there is like this human robot collaboration that also in that case it should be accessible because any workers should be able to interact and use it for whatever task they have. So.
Okay, so start early, think of it early, David says, and then less regulations or more flexibility. Micol, and what is your addition, Nima, to that? What would you change to have better accessibility?
Like if I could do anything, then I would replace accessibility with universal design, which is to design a product to the so that it works for everyone, and against among everyone is of course those with those who are dependent on accessibility per se today. But I think that's too far. So in like a more manageable step would be to include users, do human-centered design, user testing with early in the projects. And not the thing that this does is to give that project members get awareness, and that in this they research shows that they won't forget it. Like if they once see something, then they will remember it and implement it without having to do the same user testing in another project later. So I would encourage user testing. Yes.
Oh, wow. Also very good point. Interesting. Yeah, I will encourage myself for sure to learn more about universal design. I know some of our enhanced universities are also offering occasionally some activities. At least I discovered that. Great. Are there any comments? Or I see one participant from the audience wanted to say something. Raise hand. Björn, I see you are back again. If you hear me, give me a sign if you are still interested to share anything. Otherwise, I just slowly, organically open the stage to any other comments from the public. We are still around 20 people. In Slido, I will just check. So far, I don't see any digital question at least. That is okay, because maybe the formulated question or comment is a bit challenging about the topic, but maybe any comments or questions, feel free to raise your digital hand. If it is not the case, I will just double check again that I don't skip hopefully anyone wanting to share anything, but it's not the case so far. Okay, let me maybe, I mean, the stage is still open, by the way, for anyone. If you are looking for some words, how to react or comment to the things that you heard from our speakers, feel free to let me know. But so far, if I'm correct, I don't see any digital Zoom hands, but also no question in the Slido, which also on the side could mean, okay, it's so far clear. And it is useful. Some people added, by the way, also more aspects to the opening question. What comes to your mind when you hear IT accessibility? Just answer without overthinking. And let me see, some people added also the top words of, like, for example, progress. And I see it helps also, it is being added. And it is also added access to assistive technologies. Equal access, especially important, equal access to assistive technologies. Some people also think of it. And saving of time also has been just added. Also language has been added. I just see here, I did not mention that. Language, it's also interesting how all these technologies, of course, it's in academic level, we are used to English, but we know there are also lots of people with less English capacities, for example, in the administrative staff in our universities. How are they addressed by our technologies? All right, now I will just share my screen again because I don't see any comment from the audience, at least so far until now. And we are coming to the end, more or less. And yeah, it is time to share with you actually a practical tool that we promised to you. Let me just change my screen. And yeah, I was discussing this with the speakers. It is a tough topic. Okay, what is the tool? There is no one tool, of course, that helps you to be, let's say, or become more accessible in your work, whatever you do in your universities. If you are in an administrative department or in research, or maybe you are not even in the university. So we thought, okay, it is good, especially for those of you and who are not facing any accessibility issues, generally speaking, who are seeing maybe 100%, who are able to use their hands 100%, and so on and so on. For those of you, I discovered this tool that is called Amazed. And that is the link that is also developed by a Canadian university, even from what I understood. And I played that. And it is a game, a short game to experience the inaccessibility. So it's not about accessibility in the game, it's about the inaccessibility. And yes, I can tell you, it is really frustrating. So luckily, at least in my case, I can, enjoy is the wrong word, but I can try out this game without any limitations, but the game itself is very inaccessible, on purpose, of course. The goal of the game is just to make you experience how it feels like when something in a digital environment is not accessible in a way. So if you are wondering how this might feel like to have in an inaccessible digital environment, so we invite you to try this interactive tool called Amaze as a short game. And it is really very frustrating. And I think it's also kind of eye-opening in a way, especially when you can also share this with your networks, obviously. And when you see it is good to become more aware, because some people also said in the opening question, awareness is important. Our speakers also mentioned that from time to time. So that's the point. So this kind of tools help us better understand why accessibility isn't just as a checkbox or ticking the box, but it's also just a human right to involve everyone also in the digital settings that we have around us. Is there anything that from the speakers you want to, Nima, is there anything that you want to add on to that? After that, I asked others.
No, I mean,
not really. So clear.
Yeah, I said yeah.
Perfect. And
if you have any questions, let me know.
I will just for the last time, I think, double check if something new arose in Slido as potential question. It's not the case. All right. And then, David, do you have anything else to add from after presentation of this practical tool, or to finish the discussion from your perspective at least?
I think just be aware that everyone can be affected, even oneself. And I think this makes a lot of discussions about accessibility much easier.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. A little bit also this empathetical approach. And Micol, anything from your side, from your perspective, also to add on to the discussion?
Yeah, actually, I agree with what has just been said. And I think that events like this one are really important just to bring awareness to this topic. And I think there should be more for everyone to, just to learn more about all this accessibility, universal design world.
Yeah, maybe it's one of the next topics that we could even more address again, more direct, the universal design. But for those of you who want more, just besides trying out this kind of practical tour or an inaccessibility game, so you can also, of course, look at our offers. Not all the enhanced offers are, of course, addressing today's topic, but from time to time and also regularly, we have relevant offers in the big field of diversity and inclusion, including, of course, accessibility issues as well. For example, anti-bias lunch break are quite, might be eye-opening for your networks, for yourself, if you are not familiar with all these biases that are also playing an important role in the development of lots of technologies, also in NI, because they are also from most of the time biased, and also some other offers you will find in our Innovative Learning Campus homepage. The link is in the presentation, and you can also, of course, have a look on that anytime. And the Enhanced Lunchinar on IT accessibility now coming to the end in the next 2 minutes. We are currently exploring more topics to offer next Lunchinars. After the summer, for example, inclusive tools in education, just one of the possible topics. Ambiguity tolerance is one of the possible topics. So these all are possible topics. It's not set yet. So we are also open to your suggestions. Gender bias violence, disinformation and fake news, mental health, totally different topics, but in this big universe of diversity and inclusion topics, they all belong to the scope. And these are pressing issues, just to mention you some. If you see, for example, universal design also has been potentially added today to the list. We will see how to design that, but we are open to offer and continue this kind of webinars. I invite everyone to complete the evaluation form. The link will be in the follow-up email, but also already now, for those of you who are still in the room, also please let us know. Tell it to your friends and your networks if you like it. If you didn't like it, tell it to me. So then we can also learn from your feedback and then improve this kind of Lunchinars, how we design that. And having said that, let me just see. I think we are done with our session today. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Enjoy your
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nima
Thank you.
and David
Thank
and
you.
Nicole.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day. So I will just be waiting that everyone is leaving the room and then close the event after that. Thank you.
Bye, BD. Thanks for organizing.
Bye-bye. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye. Bye, Maria. You are the last one leaving. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. Bye-bye, everyone.